All right, my name is Dominic Brock. And so, what is servant leadership? So, while there's no single scholarly definition for servant leadership, it is generally characterized as a leadership philosophy that focuses on the growth and well being of the followers and is less focused on the leader. Servant leadership is countercultural, which means that it goes against societal norms of a leader being authoritative and opposing their authority and being the main focus or face of an organization. And everyone can be a servant leader, and servant leadership can be applied to many different personal and professional settings. It can also contribute to personal and professional growth, which will be expanded on throughout this presentation. A little bit of history and background of servant leadership. Servant leadership as a concept has been around for centuries, but the term wasn't popularized or coined until about 40 years ago by Robert K. Greenleaf. Greenleaf published his essay titled The Servant as Leader in 1970, and in it he proposed that the best leaders were servants first, and the key tools for a servant leader included listening, persuasion, access to intuition and foresight, use of language, and pragmatic measurements of outcomes. He was also the founder of the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership, and I encourage everyone to go check that out to learn more about servant leadership and the different programs they offer to become a better servant leader or to become a better follower under servant leadership. And Greenleaf's theories have been condensed into three main components, which we will go over now.
And with that, let's talk about the antecedent conditions of servant leadership. And these are basically the conditions that must be met in order to successfully implement servant leadership in an organization. The first of which is called context and culture. And this is where essentially an organization such as a hospital is going to be better than a auto manufacturer because they focus on service for the patients that they have within the hospital, whereas a auto manufacturer is going to be more focused on sales and the competition. Next, you have leader attributes, and this is the idea that a leader should have certain beliefs and qualities in order to implement servant leadership. For example, they have to be able to have a calling to want to lead and to be able to, as well as be able to serve others. Next, they also have to have a high degree of emotional intelligence. And this is, as we've all learned, emotional intelligence is not only knowing your own emotions, but also knowing the emotions of other people. And so they also have to have empathy when they can identify the emotions of other people. And then third, they have to have humility. And this comes in place when you are looking at, with regards to when you're training someone, for example, you have to be able to have the humility to show them your failures, what you've done in the past, so that way they don't also commit those failures. For the third part, there is follower receptivity. And this is essentially the idea that followers also have to be receptive and be willing to be open to the help from their leaders and not just see it as micromanagement. They must be willing to also give help back to their fellow employees. And with that, those are the three conditions that must be met for servant leadership to be successfully implemented. Next, let's talk about the servant leadership behaviors. And these are basically the set of behaviors that have to be met when a servant leader wants to be a servant leader. The first of which is the idea of conceptualizing. And this is where they have a full understanding of the organization, its entire mission, and be able to identify any problems that occur within the organization and be able to fix those problems as they see fit according to the company's mission. Next, they have to have emotional healing. And this is essentially where their empathy is going to be shown towards their followers and putting themselves in the shoes of their followers. And for example, let's say you have an employee that you notice within your office that has been overwhelmed with the work that they're facing. A servant leader is not only going to be able to take notice of this, but is also going to try and help them where they can. And then third, you have to be able to put your followers first. And this is where you are going to put both the needs and the interests of your followers ahead of your own. For example, let's say a follower comes to you and they're looking for a promotion. You're not just going to blow them off and ignore them. Instead, you're going to try and see what path you can put in place for them and where you can assist them to help them grow into a promotion, which leads us to the fourth behavior, and that is helping others grow and succeed. Like I just mentioned, there is a career development that you can help with your followers, but you can also help them grow on an interpersonal level as well by sharing your knowledge with them, both including your failures and successes from the past. Next, you must also be ethical. And this is where you will not compromise on what's right, even if it benefits you as the leader. For example, let's say you have a project that an employee does, and he does a wonderful job, and you present this to the executives. You do not take the credit, you give the credit where it's due to the employee. Next, you have to be able to empower your followers. So not only are you helping them by giving them what they need and lending a hand, but you're also going to eventually give them the authority and the autonomy to do the work themselves. For example, let's say you give them a new project, and within this project, you set a parameters and goals for what needs to be done, but then you also then have to give them the ability to choose how they want to do things. And lastly, the last behavior is that you should be able to create value for the community. And this could be something as simple as an annual fundraiser or something larger as a cause. For example, let's say that you have Apple, where they commit by 2030 to be carbon neutral to help the environment for everyone within the world. So it could be something as large as this or something as small as having an annual fundraiser for a charity. And with that, with those 7 behaviors and 3 antecedents, you should end up reaching an outcome of increasing the growth and performance of your followers, of which this is the defining feature of servant leadership. And it often occurs because you're able to help your followers grow by taking the time to recognize their strengths and give them the tools and the autonomy to achieve their potential. Secondly, there will also be higher organizational performance that results. And this typically comes from the trust and confidence that is fostered within employees, within the employees that they deal with. And next, you also have the idea that team members will typically go beyond what is expected of them within the organization because they want to not only help their supervisors and their fellow employees, but the organization and its customers as a whole. And lastly, there should be a positive impact on society. And there's a great example within the textbook about Mother Teresa, where she takes this to a whole nother level by creating an entire charity known as the Missionaries of Charity, where they serve poverty-stricken people with education, healthcare, and even hospices for when they need it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dominic to talk about the strengths of servant leadership.
This is what I have identified as some of the best and main strengths and benefits of servant leadership. And I wanted to connect it with sports because I intend to work in the sports industry, specifically as a coach. And servant leadership is a very highly effective coaching style. So a coach's main priority is or should at least be focusing on developing players into the best versions of themselves, not just as an athlete, but as a person as well. And empowerment is such a huge part of that because it focuses on growth and development in every aspect: emotional intelligence, in social skills, and applies to sports in their athletic ability. And in that coaching sense, one of my coaches once said to me, how you do anything is how you do everything. Meaning that if you are a tentative person or a timid person in your normal life, then that will translate into your playing style. And I found that to be incredibly true. And there are a lot of lessons that you can learn from sports that you can apply into your regular life and really just advocating for yourself and being the best possible version of yourself that you can be. And ethical and moral decisions directly relate to sportsmanship. If you have poor sportsmanship, or if you feel that you need to cheat to win, that is very unethical. Or if you have unethical tactics in your coaching, you're basically just doing a disservice to yourself and everyone that you're representing, whether it be a high school, a college, a club team, or even as high as a professional team. And making the most ethical decisions may be difficult and may not always result in something that you want, but they are necessary for short-term and long-term success. And with trust, if a player doesn't trust their coach or if a coach doesn't trust their player, then the coaching will just essentially be ineffective. And trust is essential when there is constant collaboration between leaders and followers or players and coaches. And if they can't trust each other, then nothing will be accomplished. And effective communication is important in every industry as it allows for fostering an open and transparent environment in every type of way. And communication is the foundation of these strengths of servant leadership because without it, we wouldn't be able to empower one another, we wouldn't be able to form trust or a close bond with one another, and we wouldn't be able to make ethical decisions.
Thank you, Dominic. And with that, I'm going to talk about how servant leadership can benefit an organization. The first of which is that it can help prevent what's known as knowledge hoarding. Knowledge hoarding typically occurs when employees hide information or knowledge due to a lack of trust or respect with their other employees around them. And this tends to exist in work environments when an employee feels judged for any opinions or ideas they give, or even faces punishment for speaking out or asking questions, which as a result ends up making them keep what they want to say within themselves. And the organization suffers because they don't end up hearing those ideas. And overall, servant leadership can help decrease knowledge hoarding by increasing what's known as psychological safety. And psychological safety occurs when people feel that they can express themselves with no judgment. And it typically comes when they also have respect and the trust of the people around them. So as a result, they have more free-flowing ideas that they're willing to give with the confidence that they will not be embarrassed, judged, or punished in any form. And with that, knowledge hoarding is prevented. And next, it can help also decrease employee turnover intention. And this occurs when employees intend to quit within the short term, typically due to decreased job satisfaction. And it's typically a result of a lack of psychological safety. And in the study that I read that came from China, they looked at higher education and teachers. And what they found is that when you had a level of servant leadership within an organization, the teachers had higher psychological safety, meaning that they were able to give their opinions. They had the support they needed when they did give those opinions and the freedom to make their own decisions. And they had higher job satisfaction and therefore decreased turnover because they were less likely to quit. And lastly, it can help increase revenue. And this is due to going back to the knowledge hoarding that I was mentioning earlier. Knowledge hoarding can prevent many ideas coming into an organization and a loss in revenue from it. And within that article, they claimed that they found that over $31.5 billion is lost annually due to knowledge hoarding for Fortune 500 companies. So if you can prevent knowledge hoarding, you can help increase your revenue with servant leadership. And that's it for my part on the presentation. I'm going to give it back to Dominic to finish up.
Thank you, Zach. So while there are many downsides to servant leadership, it would be untrue and unfair to say that there aren't any at all. Servant leadership can be quite time consuming because it involves constant mentoring and supporting of the followers. And doing this all the time and having this take up all of your efforts could potentially leave little to no time for other important tasks, and such as your other work or your personal time or your time with others, your family, your friends. So if you allow it to completely consume your life, that could be detrimental. Servant leaders can also be perceived as weak due to their lack of authority or imposing figure. They can also be seen as indecisive and unable to effectively lead their followers. And this is more so a criticism rather than a weakness because it's more of an opinion. Servant leaders are servant leadership is undoubtedly an effective leadership style, but there are instances where it may not be the best solution. High pressure situations or crisis situations are not necessarily scenarios where servant leadership are the most effective. For example, some highly regulated industries such as finance or healthcare have strict regulatory requirements and compliance standards. And servant leadership's flexibility and emphasis on autonomy may not align well with the need for the rigid adherence to the different regulations. And leaders may need to adopt a more authoritarian approach in these types of scenarios to ensure complete compliance. Also, in military or police organizations, hierarchical command structures are essential. And there are elements of servant leadership that are beneficial to these organizations and help boost morale and camaraderie, but it may not be appropriate to the same degree, as there are clear chains of command and strict adherence to orders are vital for these organizations to be able to function effectively. And also, followers may take advantage of their leader if the leader is overly helpful and overly selfless. Sometimes it can be detrimental to be too selfless and to not care about your own needs and your own interests. And we are, as humans, selfish in nature, and servant leadership can unfortunately lend itself to that being exposed. And similarly, the fact that tasks and responsibilities can be shared can create a lack of accountability, both in achieving goals or objectives or addressing concerns or potential errors. So basically, in conclusion, servant leadership can be an incredibly effective leadership style, and it's quite a unique one as well, with few glaring weaknesses or criticisms. And it focuses on putting the follower's needs before those of the leader, and is committed to growth and success of everyone involved, both professionally and personally. Servant leadership is highly adaptable, and it can be used to impact communities, businesses, and other forms of personal and professional development. It can help foster an environment of collaboration, empowerment, ethical decision making, and create deep, meaningful relationships, which could be essential to the survival and the thriving of different industries. It can help organizations prevent knowledge hoarding, increase job satisfaction, decrease turnover, and increase revenue, which are all incredibly important for the overall success and longevity of any business.
Thank you, Dominic. And for that, I think that concludes our presentation. Thanks so much for listening.